Good morning, Mr. White.
Good morning, Mrs. Angel. How are you on this fine morning?
Oh, seamless start. There's nothing like a seamless start to a podcast. It just amazes me every day just how good we are at this. So I want to introduce our very patient, very special guest we have with us today. We have Brendan Kenna. Welcome to our podcast.
Morning, guys.
Hey, Brendan.
We are pumped, absolutely pumped to have you here. The crowd is going crazy for you already, which is very exciting. Let's tell everybody. Exactly. It's like we're at the concert, but we're all here for you, Brendan. So let's tell everybody a bit about the alumni and a bit more about that Brendan belongs to. So he is an Australian Schools Plus Teaching Fellow. He won that award in 2022, and he is a Global Teaching Prize Ambassador. So he was top 50 in 2023 last year. He went to the primary school St. Brendan's in Shepparton, and he went to the Notre Dame College in Shepparton for secondary school, and he went to RMIT in Melbourne for his university studies. So, Mr. White, tell us a bit more about Mr. Kenna.
Brendan is a 2013 Teacher of the Year finalist, a 2013 winner of Best First Year School, 2022 Schools Plus Fellow, 2023 Global Teacher Prize finalist, which I'm looking forward to talking to you about, and 2023 Australia's Most Influential Educators finalist. Brendan designed and implemented a whole school sensory motor program and sensory diets that have been transformational. And for those who don't know, a sensory diet refers to structured breaks at specific times. He chairs the school pediatric clinic. Brendan coaches staff and completes students' sensory profiles that are analysed and used to create sensory diets. He facilitated the construction of purpose-built sensory rooms supported by the zones of regulation, and he implemented school-wide positive behaviour support, a whole school framework that develops positive, safe, supportive learning cultures. Welcome, Brendan. It's great to have you.
Oh, sorry, this crowd is unruly tonight. Go for it, Brendan.
No, it's just great. A pleasure to be here, guys. So, it's just part of a team, just chipping in and doing my best to try and help kids out in school.
He's always deferring to his team. It's a beautiful thing, which is why we've worked so hard to make sure that we've got Brendan on the podcast to tell his story. And there's a lot to unpack there. But let's kick off with the question we always ask all of our guests. Who is the teacher who has had the most impact on your life?
Yeah, so it took me a little bit of time to come up with this answer because there's obviously been a few, but I always like to clarify the best teacher and best educator because the best educator I ever had was my father. He taught me all about being a good role model and standing by your morals and ethics. But the best teacher I had was during my time at Notre Dame College. It was a Catholic college in regional Victoria, and his name was Brother Brian. And he was very influential in my life, and the reason for that was the fact that he was able to show me that irrespective of your background, you could achieve great things, and he was able to do that both as a Catholic brother and also as an elite sports person, and he was competing at the time for a spot in the state side with the likes of Terry Alderman, and I was very big on my cricket at the time, and Brother Brian was able to instill life skills he applied to me that I was able to transfer into the classrooms, things such as commitment and working hard and training really hard, and then realising that irrespective of how hard I trained, I still may not make the team. Mm-hmm. And those types of life skills that I developed through my teacher there, in combination with my dad, were the two of the both A, best educator, and B, best teacher that I ever had.
Oh, I love it. And so does he know that is he still teaching at the moment?
I'm actually not sure what Brother Brian's up to these days. There's not too many Catholic brothers still in teaching, particularly at Notre Dame College where I was educated. So it was started off as a boys' school, which was called St. Coleman's. So I did lose contact with Brother Brian, unfortunately, but if I had the opportunity to catch up with him again, I'd be sharing this podcast with him and letting him know that he was very instrumental in my formative years.
That's amazing, and that, I guess that's our aim of this podcast, Brendan. We want to name and fame those teachers who have made such an impact, and obviously you've gone on to have such an impact in education. So it's a very would be very proud. I'm sure he would be very proud of you and the impact that you are now having on education. To know he had some influence on that is exactly what we're all about. So let's try and find Brother Brian through the wonderful world of social media and see if we can track him down so he can know just how amazing he has been for you.
I think that's great. It's passing on the baton, isn't it? But I suppose, like, when I think back, like, I'm into my early 50s now, and he would have been in his 30s when he was teaching me. So he'd be potentially approaching, using a sporting analogy, the end of his innings.
Yes.
Hopefully he's not. But Brother Brian was instrumental. Yeah,
that is absolutely fabulous, and it's so great that you can remember him, and he had such an impact. I love what you said. It's not about just the ones that inspire you to greatness, but the ones that teach you to deal with failure is that's a bit of a trend that we've kind of heard from some of our guests along the way as well. Can you think of any specific things that he did that actually helped you with that?
He failed me a fair bit.
Thank you, Brother Brian.
So in the classroom, like, he taught me a hell of a lot. I had to work really hard when I was at school. I was naturally, I was very gifted at being outside and enjoying sport. I wasn't so gifted about being an academic, and I had to work really hard for the marks that I achieved. And it's one of those things where, he was always able to apply a life analogy to a school-based situation, which really enabled me to draw the connection between education. And it's like that, you're sitting in a maths class and the kids would say, why are we learning this garbage? We're not going to use this in life. But as soon as the teacher's able to draw the parallel, you're able to connect. And Brother Brian was certainly able to do that. And I make sure that I do that with all my interactions with children. I always try and apply a life skill to a skill that we're learning in the school, so that creates a form of motivation for them to be inquisitive to learn more.
Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I really like that idea that sport is such a great educator itself as well. And the term is metaphor for life and all that sort of stuff. But I really like what you said about it taught you discipline and preparation, but also how to deal with failure. And I would imagine also executing under pressure as well. That's
absolutely.
something. Yeah, that's something that I think is often just overlooked. There's a lot of effort you have to put in, but you also have to be able to execute under pressure. And I think we shy away a little bit about that because, yes, it is stressful and it can be really challenging. But if you're supported in failure, it can become a really, really powerful learning tool.
Absolutely, and it's something that I always instill amongst my staff when they call it a performance and development plan, and I always just call it a development plan, because my role is to support you to become a better version of you and make sure that you've got the skills that you need to be a better operator. It's not to performance manage you, it's to support you to make you better. And analogy, when I spent 20 years coaching at the elite level in cricket for Cricket Victoria, and one of the analogies I always use with the players was, I don't care how you are as an individual, I care about how you can make one of your teammates better. And I always apply that to my staffing situation at the school that I work at. What can you do as a colleague to make your room, your partner next door a better teacher? And if we have that mindset amongst our peers, where we've got a real conducive learning environment that is particularly set up for psychological safety, and that's where failure, you're encouraging failure, because it's only through failure that you learn to grow. but that only occurs if you're in a psychologically safe environment. And that's something that I do with everybody I work with.
I love this term, psychological safety, and it's being used more and more, which is great. But there's definitely being recognised just how important that is to be able to have a workplace that is focused on growth. And it's not growth because you're not good enough. It's growth because the environment that we work in is really complex, and there's no such thing as a perfect school and a perfect class, and there's no such thing, because we're working with 30 imperfect people with an imperfect teacher. It's highly complex, and everybody's got something to work on, not because you're not good enough, but because we're professionals and our kids are really complex and constantly changing. So it's growth. It's growth not because you're not good enough. It's just growth because we all need to grow.
Yeah, we're lifelong learners, and it's critically important that as teachers and mentors, it's our job to share our vulnerabilities in the classroom so that children see that, there's a mistake, and that's how we fix it, and that's how we build. And that, synapse is only fire when mistakes are made, and that's where growth occurs. And you guys are acutely aware of that. Yeah.
I love it. So can you tell us a bit more about that psychological safety? So it's easy enough to say. Actually, it's not easy to say psychological safety. It doesn't roll off the tongue easily, if I'm being honest. But it's hard to say, and it's even harder to create in your school, because there's lots of top type A personalities as teachers who are looking for perfection, and sometimes feedback can be a really confronting thing. So how have you got some top tips for creating a psychologically safe school?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few, but probably number one, you need to be authentic, because you can't fake creating psychologically safe environments for staff to work in. You need to share vulnerability. You need to be having a two-way open communication that's very supportive. You need to be living by your actions. So if, Will was struggling with a particular lesson and I said I was going to support him and he didn't understand content, well, I need to be in there in the trench with Will, working with him and supporting him and sharing our vulnerabilities, having that mutual feedback. We've all got something to learn, but we've also got something to teach. And that doesn't matter whether you're a graduate or whether you're a principal. As soon as you think as a leader that you know everything, you need to get out.
You're done. Exactly.
That's it.
Love it.
Yeah. And you also, I was thinking about it when I was over with amongst the national teaching fellows, and again when I was over in Paris talking globally with some of the educators there. We're in a human-led industry, and yet we tend to promote technical leaders to leadership positions, and sometimes a technical leader may not be the best leader to lead humans. And we are in an industry jam-packed full of humans. Mm-hmm. We need human leadership.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it.
It's critically important, and that's something that I shared once with Jason Clare about. When the recruitment, we tend to promote those that have knowledge about a literacy program, or there may be a really good teaching and learning coach or a teaching and learning specialist, but they may not necessarily be the best leader of a team. And when you're in a human-led industry, human leadership needs to be your number one skill set. And I think that's part of the issue why we have retention. It's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. That emotional intelligence, and so how do you talk to emotional intelligence and so that you can demonstrate that emotional intelligence, because it's a bit more subjective, and it's not a tangible thing. It's harder to create those tangible examples that you can speak to in an interview. So you're exactly right. It's easy to talk to the literacy program and the data that underpins that.
Yes.
Yeah. Great point.
Absolutely. And it's, and you need to have a mix of both. You need to have that, when we talked about psychological safety before, amongst the psychological safety, there is accountability. So psychological safety is all about setting the parameters in place to enable someone to share their vulnerability so that you can really have authentic growth. And that's where that dual accountability is. I'm committed to you, Shaz, because I want you to be a better teacher, and you're going to be, there's that reciprocal obligation. I'm going to be a better leader for you because I'm going to do this, and this to support you, and you're going to be a better teacher for me and the kids because you've got the support you need to grow.
Love it.
That's great.
So good. So
That's
good.
Great.
Sounds like a place I want to work.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Can you take us through the sensory motor program that you've designed and implemented? Can you tell us a bit more about the nuts and bolts of how that works, what it is?
Yeah, so that came out of I chaired in my school, so we're the third most disadvantaged school in the state, and I was chairing paediatric clinics that had been operational long before I got there. But we were sitting down, and I was chairing maybe the first half a dozen clinics, and we were identifying that there were certain deficiencies, or children may have had certain, they may have had environmental trauma, that they may have had a cognitive impairment. There was all sorts of disabilities that students we were able to identify. But apart from play therapy, which is a great intervention, apart from play therapy, there was nothing else. And I said to the paediatrician at the time, I find this, I had a real moral imperative to do something else. So I started doing some activities originally with children that were disengaged from the classroom. And this was based on my sporting background and my knowledge as a PE teacher. And I did a series of activities with the students and then got them back into the classroom. It was very time specific. And then over a period of time, I noticed that children were becoming less and less dysregulated. And that started my journey of looking up, neuroscientist, Professor Mary Helen Imaldino Yang, and looking up the likes of Bruce Perry and looking at trauma and the impact of the trauma on the learning brain. And as the chair of the paediatric clinic, the paediatrician, Dr. Peter Eastor, I had a front row seat to one of the best paediatricians I've ever worked for or worked with. And I learnt from him as well. And then we employed a couple of OTs, and from that, I was able to develop these sensory diets, and the information that was shared with me from the OT, Annie Seckle, she was brilliant, and we worked on the refinement of that to create a sensory diet. So the history of a sensory diet is nobody, including us, have got the cognitive stamina to sit still for an extended period of time. We need to be able to zone in and out of our optimum state of arousal, they call it. So when we're learning, we dip in and out. And it's really important that we provide opportunities for students so that when they dip below that, which would be your traditional EOR, where they become very lethargic or they become hyper-aroused, being a Tigger, it's about giving them the sensory input that they need in order to enable them to get back into that stable state of arousal that's conducive to learning. When we're able to do that, we can access the curriculum that the teachers have prepared. If we don't address that, it plays out in behaviour. So we have students that complete, so I'll have a conversation with the teacher. They will come to me and say, look, I've had a few issues with Will. He's not sitting down on the floor. We're having these issues.
That sounds legit. Mm.
Yep. So
I'm a
teachers, yeah. So teachers identify a need. We then complete a sensory profile on that child, and then we design a diet. And that diet, like you do when you eat breakfast at a certain time and you have lunch at a certain time. We look at the data, the behaviour data. I look at the data, and we target specific breaks for the child throughout the day. So they go into a purpose-built sensory room that we've spent a lot of money financing to get it set up. And it's based on the zones of regulation. So a student will complete a check-in, and then from there, they complete a series of activities. They complete a series of activities to then allow them to get the sensory input that they require in order for them to rejoin the lesson and get back into learning.
So how long would they typically be out of learning, undertaking that particular activity to get them back into the zone?
Yep, great question, Shaz. So they're very time specific. So it'd be no more than 10 minutes. So it's 10 minutes, and then what I've done with our staff is I've had all our education support staff trained up in sensory processing, disorder professional learning. Plus I've run PL after hours with staff as well on conducting sensory breaks within the classroom. And I found that when I was conducting the research, we found that with NAPLAN, because that's how we're judged, unfortunately, it's one of our main measures. We found that of the children that performed in the top 2 NAPLAN bands, 43% of those had sensory diet. So this is something that it's evolved, and I've spent a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of consultation, and that's the nuts and bolts of it, and it takes up my entire day at work. I'm working with staff, working with students, adapting things all the time, because we all come with our own bag of emotions, teachers and kids, and sometimes we need to regulate ourselves first as teachers before we can regulate kids, and kids buy into our own state of regulation. So I'm working with staff and providing a lot of professional learning around their own regulation state. So it's been a massive undertaking, but it's also been something I'm super proud of.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So what does it look like in the classroom then, if you've got some students leaving and then coming back, and then what are the students doing while they are on break? Is it? I mean, I assume it changes based on the individual needs, but what does that look like?
Yep. So what it looks like, Will, is it's different for every child. So depending on, so if a child identifies that they're the typical EOR, you would be completing a series of more alerting activities to help them. And this is all based on neuroscience, and it's also based on physiology of oxygen to the brain increases, alertness. So with a traditional child that may be seen as a Tigger, you're not going to go outside and be doing alerting activities with that student, because they're going to return to the classroom and be highly dysregulated. So it's a matter. It is certainly a science, and I've worked with a lot of schools that have said, "Oh yeah, we've got a sensory program and a sensory room." Well, they've got a room that's got some toys and fidget spinners and things like that in it, but that's not a sensory program. It's another space that kids go and become distracted in. And the longer they're away from the classroom, the less successful they're going to be when they return to class. So it is really, you need to know what you're doing. And I've seen situations in some settings where they're certainly learning from their mistakes, because people go out and shoot hoops or they'll play basketball, and you think it's got nothing to do with. It's not about that at all. It's about the neuroscience of how the brain works and the sensory inputs that we require. So
getting back into that learning environment. So looking forward to getting back into that learning environment and celebrating the learning.
Yeah,
I like the 10-minute. I love the efficiency of it, and it's a really, really targeted skill set, that it's only taking 10 minutes to do that emotional regulation and then get them back into learning. And I think that that's really telling and important data when you're talking about, lots of people don't like talking about NAPLAN. I don't mind talking about NAPLAN. It's a data set, and it's we're time poor in education, so it's hard to get that standardized testing data. So it is what it is. You can't pin everything on it, but it's a data set that can tell us some really important things. So I love that 43% of your top 2 bands. So these kids, they wouldn't be in the top 2 bands if they weren't in class regularly, but they are taking that time to get into that zone to then get back into class to really do that learning. That's really really interesting data as well.
Yeah, and obviously data. You need to triangulate data. You need to have other forms of data. You can't just hang your hat on one form of data. But the more often you can't teach a child to socialise when they're not in a social setting. So it's really and you can't reinforce a negative behaviour in the classroom by taking them out to do breaks and things like that, because that just tells them that we can do this again because we're going to go outside. So the preferred environment is always the classroom. It has to be. Yeah.
Yep. I love it. So obviously this is fascinating. We're going to ask you to give our listeners some links at the end of the episode to point them in the right direction of the research. But this has obviously been very impactful because you've obviously won lots of awards. You know, you've been named on that the most influential educators list, and you were named in the top 50 in the Global Teachers Award for 2023. So for our listeners who I think actually at the end of last year we were teasing that we were going to be interviewing you, but unfortunately our interview last year was cancelled because you were swept away in a jet over to be at that award ceremony in Paris at the end of last year. So obviously the Global Teacher Prize is a $1 million prize. I didn't stutter. I said $1 million to an educator. That's right. To an educator in the world. It happens every year, sponsored by the Vaki Foundation. So they're really putting this spotlight on education and the absolute impact that it has on the world. So Brendan was shortlisted to the top 50. He had a 1 in 50 chance of winning $1 million. Unfortunately, he didn't win it, which is why we're getting to talk to him this evening. So tell us a bit about that, though. I was lucky to go to the Global Teachers Forum in Dubai in 2018, just to be a spectator there and mix with all of the very special people. There's celebrities, it's glitz and glamour for educators. Tell us everything. Spread the goss.
Well, number one at the Vaki Foundation and UNESCO are the two chief agencies. There's a lot of vetting that goes into it. So PricewaterhouseCoopers is everything goes through them. So the actual process itself, there was an interview process, there was an application process. We were, as you know, shows that you get as a National Teaching Fellow through Schools Plus, that you get offered or encouraged to apply. So there's an application process, and then you have to sit a series of interviews. So I recall sitting in this very chair at about 2:00 in the morning once, wearing my suit for an interview, and it was unbelievable. It was like staggering. And when the actual event itself was one component, like we went to UNESCO headquarters, and the security, we had one of the presenters there was in a forum was the Prime Minister of Ukraine, President's wife. She was presented there, and the entourage of security behind her was unbelievable. And we, myself and one of the other Australian representatives, Ian Preston, we met with some ministers from Australia, and we spent quite a bit of time with them. So we just felt very privileged. Again, and I said when I was over there, I talked about the program, but I was there representing as a proud member of principal class, really proud of the work that the teachers did at my school, not only the teachers, but the education support staff. And I was just there representing us. But we had, there was people from obviously all over the world. So, there was, I've formed some really close friendships with people from all around the globe, and to hear their stories. And I won't pinpoint anyone, but, just the inspiration of one of the top 10 finalists. He was from Ukraine, and what he's had to do to get through to teach his kids, and we whinge about people not turning up on time for yard duty, and then you listen to their stories and you think, my God, you know, inspirational. And the winner of the Global Teacher Prize, Sister Zeph, you know, from Pakistan, she's a lovely lady. She started up her own school, working with the extremely disadvantaged individuals, and I just felt really proud and inspired and awestruck to be in that company. And yeah, we were treated really. It was very special. And if you asked me 10 years ago that you're going to go to Paris in education, I'd say you've got rocks in your head.
It's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, but to have that experience was just unbelievable, and I'd encourage anybody, firstly, to go through and apply, and I encourage anybody to put in application, and principals out there. I challenge principals out there that may be listening to nominate their staff, because if you're not just the sheer activity of nominating a staff member, you're telling them that you believe in them. They are great. We value you. That's one of the top 3 reasons people leave any occupation is they don't feel valued. So apply for a Schools Plus fellowship, and then from there, if you have the opportunity to get a Schools Plus fellowship, then apply for the Global Teacher Prize, because it is awe-inspiring, and the connections that you make are unbelievable.
And you're as part of that, and right now, very soon the Commonwealth Bank Teaching Fellows Awards are opening very soon, so we'll definitely be letting our listeners know about that. And absolutely, there's a basically you're automatically shortlisted if you become an Australian Teaching Fellow. They're respecting the process so much that there's an automatic top 100 or top 200 shortlisting process, pretty much, if you become an Australian Teaching Fellow. And then, but then obviously beyond that, then Brendan's been shortlisted again and again from there, which is very, very impressive for Brendan and Ian, for our 2023 representatives. Very impressive.
Yeah, very, very humbling. And like I said, none of this would be possible without, the great work of the staff at the school that I represent.
They must have been so proud, and to know that you're over there representing their work and being part of that. And that's something that you're absolutely fabulous at, Brendan. You're always, bringing your team into that success and acknowledging them, which is a beautiful thing.
If only I could have fitted a couple in a suitcase.
I'm sure they offered. I'm sure they showed you how stretchy they were. They could hold their breath for 24 hours to get over there to Paris.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Longest flight. It was a long flight, but it was just the best experience. I would go as far as to say, without Schools Plus involvement, I'm not sure whether I'd still be in education. Like that's how instrumental Schools Plus and the cohort that I've been fortunate to work with, and even as recent as yesterday, I had a meeting with Mr. Cleary, as you would know, Shaz. So
Mr. John Cleary from the Northern Territory. Yes.
So I met with him talking about student voice and agency, and he was a teaching fellow from a previous year. So being able to tap in the likes of him, and then relationship with yourself, Shaz, the network that we have is staggering, and
it is.
And it's just inspiring. So that those individuals, along with teachers that I work with at my school, has kept me in education.
Absolutely, we're in a good place, and we've been through some dark times, but I know just the quality of educators that we have in Australia is really, really inspiring. So it's so good that you're shouting them out and recognizing that we get to work with them every day. It's pretty cool job. I know that you're going to have a great magical moment to share with us. So with all of that amazing work that you've been doing, I am excited to hear a recent-ish magical moment.
Yeah, magical moment.
The sting goes on for a long time. I'm sorry. Go for it, Brendan.
That seriously, was that Taylor Swift?
I will pass that on to my son. He does think he's kind of a big deal. So
he will never.
thank
He will
you.
never shake that off.
Yeah, he did.
Good.
Nice. All right, go for it, Brendan.
Yeah, so in Victoria, we have they've rolled out the mental health in primary schools project, which is brilliant. We've all acknowledged that for far too long, mental health has been secondary to teaching and learning, and they implemented a mental health in primary schools program, and one of the main facilitators, Beck Natalizio, I'm going to name and shame her.
Mm-hmm.
I taught her at Notre Dame College. She was in my year 10 class, and during one of the opening forums that we had here in Shepparton, she highlighted a teacher that inspired her to go on and be a teacher, and talked about this teacher, and that teacher happened to be me, and I got a sudden onset of hay fever.
Your eyes went red, a bit leaky.
Yeah, and just her to publicly share that off the cuff was just inspiring. It just I reached out to her afterwards and I said, well, number one, she'll keep. I'll get her back.
Yeah.
This is it, I suppose. But yeah, she was, a student that's. She felt that I had an impact in some way, shape, or form in her future, and she's an absolute champion for mental health, and she's leading a team of staff through Melbourne Uni and rolling it out all around Victoria, and
Right.
to have a small part in and to see her go from being a snotty-nosed Year 11 kid that I taught a few years ago to being an inspiring leader in education in the mental health space is immensely proud moment for me.
That is so good, and that's why we have to find Brother Brian if he's still batting in his innings, that so that he can know the impact that he had on you. And we can tie this up in a knot then, and we can make sure that the circle of life acknowledges the impact that they've had as well. So that is such a great magical moment.
I love that.
Before we let you go, we're going to play a little segment that we like to call "Say What." Are you happy to play?
Say what?
Say what? Exactly right.
Very good.
You've got it. All right, so I'm going to ask you a question. The question is the answer is a number. Whitey's going to answer first. Don't worry, and then whoever's closest is going to be the winner. So the first question is, how many teachers are there in Victoria? You both live in Victoria, so this should be quite a close. You should both know. And Whitey, you get to go first.
Oh, geez. I'm going to go. Define teacher.
A registered teacher. They're registered with the Victorian College of Teachers.
Okay, VIT. Very good. Okay, let's go 44,000. Ooh.
All right.
I like that response. That's good.
Yeah, I was looking around about 49 to 53,000.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you 53,000. Because the answer is actually the answer is actually 129,000.
129,000.
Sit with that for a little bit.
129,000.
Hey,
You
I'm
don't
not
make
making
this
this up.
You don't make this up.
I'm not making this up.
I'll accept that.
I should probably give you my source. But I'm not going to because I don't have it right on hand. But I did my research before, and we're moving on to the next question. We're definitely giving that point to Brendan.
Yes, okay.
Well done.
But
all right.
we're miles off.
Score check. It's 1-0 to Brendan. All right. The next question is, so Brendan's from the beautiful town of Shepparton. So I'd love to know, what is the population of Shepparton?
Human population of Shepparton?
Yes, please. Just the humans. Thank you,
humans.
Mr. White.
All right. Okay. I reckon Shep is about I reckon Shep would be about 68,000.
All right. What have you got, Brendan?
He's just about on the money. Greater Shepparton's around about 68,000.
You got to give me. You got to say 68,001, or you've got to say 67,999.
I'll go 68,050.
Well, that's very impressive. You're not right though, but it is 68,925.
What?
So I think we can comfortably say that on this occasion that Mr. Brendan Kenna has been the winner.
Well done.
And in fact, he did.
Pretty popular result, that. Well done.
He did say what, indeed. All right. We could talk to you all day and all night, but let's finish off with, is there any directions that you can point our listeners into if they want any more information about what we've talked about tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. If they could, they can reach out to me. I can give my email address, and I can share with them, in a variety of different forums. But it's Brendan, BRENDAN .Kenna, KENNA @education.vic.gov.au.
Absolutely fantastic. So there's lots. He's mentioned so much research there tonight. So if you haven't written that down as we've gone along, please reach out to Brendan so that you can have a look at how you could look at introducing sensory diets into your school or any of the other information that he's talked about this evening. Just because I want to keep Mr. White on his toes to see if he can get at least one win. Mr. White, how would people reach out to us should they want to reach out to our podcast?
Well, they could jump on the email and flick us an email.
What's that email again?
teacherschangelivespodcast@gmail.com. Hey?
He's good. Brendan, he usually gets that wrong. Hence why the opportunity to correct himself. Anywhere else?
We've only been doing this for just over a year. Yes, and all the socials.
Season 6 coming up.
Instabook and Facegram and all that. Yes, I'm sure that we have those.
FaceSpace.
FaceSpace. Yes. So get in touch. Flick us your magic moments or even a Whitey's Wisecrack if you want to see if you can dethrone the king. Good luck. But what have I missed? Magical moments and teaching tales.
Teaching tales. Love it. Those funny stories that that come up along the way as well. We're looking forward to sharing more and more of those as the seasons roll out. Mr. Brendan Kenna, you haven't disappointed. You're an absolute legend. You've got the biggest heart in education, I believe. And it's been such a joy to get to speak to you.
Yeah, and it's been a privilege to catch up with you guys. And obviously people can also catch me on Facebook. Look at, Brendan Kenna on Facebook and Insta as well, and Snapchat. So, so that's look, I've got 3 young daughters, so I'm all over it. And I'd like to change my first answer to 127,837 if I can.
127,800. There you go. You've got it. You've absolutely nailed it. You were already the winner, but you've just absolutely brought it home even further. That's how many teachers there are in Victoria. All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Kenna. Good afternoon, Mr. Kenna.
Good afternoon, boys and girls. Will at Shaz and Will.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Brendan.
See you later, Mr. White.
Thank you, everyone. See you, Mrs. Angel. See ya.
Powered by Riverside.